Right, so these Celtic crosses, right, are very frequent in Scotland. In fact, there's more of the Celtic style crosses associated with Scotland and Ireland, I think, than anywhere else. So we know that they originate from around the time when, the Celtic and Druid tradition kind of passes over to Christianity, right? Now, I know that visually it's easy to make representations and associations between, obviously they've got the sites like Rathray and all the other ring sites. So, I mean, it's clear to see when you look at it, there is a combination of the Christian symbol and of the Celtic symbols because it's got Celtic knots all through it, right? Now, the people who study the recumbent circles in the northeast of Scotland, in Aberdeenshire, right, they will have had it in their mind that, it's a circle and it's got a recumbent flat stone across one specific place, right? Now, it's easy to see that in this stone cross, you get breaks in the circle where you've got this big bit of, you've got 4 separate pieces of stone, but in the recumbent stone circles, you only have one piece laid down, right? So usually you don't associate, you don't think, you don't look at it and go, well, there's an exact relationship there. But I have been thinking about some of the aspects of, the Christian theology, right? And there's some other videos that I've put in other posts on this group and in the megalithic research group, and I thought that everybody had actually seen them and watched them. So when I put this post, I didn't want to have to put those videos again because I've already put them in the group and I thought people had already listened to it, right? So, I was going to get around to maybe, bringing them up or adding it, but I didn't want to put too many things at the start of the post because I didn't want to clutter it up too much. I just wanted to raise the subject. So when the priest actually goes about doing the baptism or the blessing, whenever you do it with the holy water, you do to the Father, to the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So you start at the top and you use the Father, and then down to the bottom to the Son, right? Now, when you get onto the matter of the Holy Spirit, you go from the side to side, right? You go, from the left to right or the right to left. And the Holy Spirit, when he says, and the Holy Spirit, and he's making reference to the Holy Spirit running through, he goes from side to side, right? Now, the Celtic version of the cross, not the Roman version, the Celtic version of the cross, has the circle incorporated, it going all the way through, right? Now, what significance has that got to the torque? Well, the leaders wore the torque around the neck symbolically, and it was a power thing. We know now that actually when you do make those metal rings, they have some magnetic properties and it can be beneficial to your health. So there is a flow of, magnetism, what you can compare to, some sort of flow or spirit, or even if it's not spirit, it is a type of flow running through that metal object, and when you've got a leader, they're meant to have, the leadership of the clan, whatever, so it's meant to be the whole, they're commanding, running the clan, right? Now, what has that got to do with the recumbent stone circle, right? Well, these crosses are made in stone, right? A lot of the Celtic, Celtic knot crosses, right? Now, when we go from side to side and say the Holy Spirit, okay, if you got the recumbent stone circle, right, you've got that stone in part of it that is laid horizontal. And as outlined in some of the photos I've put in the other posts, when you get onto the prehistory guys videos, which I've put the photos, the moon actually goes across the top of the recumbent stones. It's passing over. Now, in the Christian faith, you've also got this reference to this feast of the Passover of the Spirit, the passing over of the Spirit. Now, whether or not it's from some totally, completely non-related Christian aspect, or whether there is something in it from the Celtic aspect, this symbol, this particular Celtic cross, is definitely a combination from, the early Christians, but adopting aspects from the Celtic religion, right? So we've got this thing to do with spirit, right? Passing over or passing through. And in the recumbent stone circles, we've got the moon going over the top. Now it is the courses of the moon through the heavens, right? The course of the moon through the heavens passes over, and they're physically set permanently. And, when we think of the Holy Spirit running through, the humans, through the people, it's set, it's a natural force that is set in motion through us. The Spirit runs through us. So it's another, the roots and courses of the Spirit's through us, right? Now, I've shown in some other posts, if you've seen it or not, I'll put the link, but, I was going to get onto that once we'd got the conversation going. I didn't want to put it all straight away in the start of the post because it'd clutter it up. I just wanted to raise the subject and get onto the conversation of it. I've shown you've got the village stocks, which have got the two stones at the side, and then you've got the wood going across, and you've got the holes cut in the wood. Now, we know that they have got a different purpose in use, but they were created also, I think, symbolically, because when you get the picture of the prehistory guys up with the moon going across, and it's the circle spot of the moon over the recumbent, and you've got the two stones at the side, and then when you put it next to the picture of the stocks with the holes cut in it, you can see, there's, it's as if they've chosen that design to remind us it's got dual purpose. Not only has it got a practical use immediately as stocks, but it also, I think they chose to use it to remind us of those, the moon passing over the stone circles, because it's got the circles cut in the wood, right? And it's the same setup. Now, with the Celtic Cross, I actually think that this is what I wanted to get onto, right? Because I've been talking 7 minutes 30 now, right? So, with Newgrange, how could this cross have anything to do with Newgrange, right? Well, it's this, you've got the two motions on the two axes. The first motion, when we go from the father to the son, right? Further, father, son, right? From top to bottom. So, if you think of Newgrange, right, and this has actually got a circle in it, like Newgrange is a circle, and it's got an entrance where the light shines through. So if you could think of the cross at the bottom being the light shining into Newgrange, right, which is the circle on this cross in front of us, right, at certain times of year, it's to do with the height of the sun in the sky. You've got high points of the sun and the lowest points of the sun, right? And it only fits into the chamber and goes through at a certain point. But when you do it with when you draw this out with your finger and say from the father to the son, it mentions son, but we talk about son as a son and daughter son, right? Son or daughter. But but you've got this high point at the top of the cross, and you're actually drawing out an axis from top to bottom. And almost, at summer solstice at Stonehenge, you've got a high point of sun, and at Newgrange, you've got a low point of sun. And it has to be a certain time when it goes into the chamber, right? Now, funnily enough, when you look at the cross, and if you're looking down on Newgrange from a bird's eye view, you could see it as there's the chamber with it shining in, and it has got actually, those three things look like the chambers of many of the Granges. But if you look at it straight on now in front of us, the cross stood up, not looking down from above, right? And if you draw it out with your finger, as if, you dipped it in holy water, and you go from the father to the son, it's almost like saying there's a high point of a sun and a low point of a sun, right? Then, when and the sun shines into the light comes into the chamber. Now, if you think, well, what has that got to do with the recumbent stone circles? Because they're in the north east of Scotland, Aberdeenshire, right? Well, if you say, once you've done the father son, that's one thing to remember about the sights, the light shining through at certain times here, high point and low point. Then you've got the other aspect of, and the Holy Spirit. Well, when you do the Holy Spirit, you go from side to side. Well, and it's actually like a recumbent, that part of the cross going across is like the stone in a recumbent circle. And we've got the circle here anyway. It's not exactly at one end only, but it reminds us of the Holy Spirit passing through. Now, the moon glides across the top of the stone circle. And it actually bridges, the stone lays down and bridges a gap between stones, but only at one point where the moon goes over, where the spirit of the moon passes over, right? And it raises to my mind the feast of the Passover. I don't know why it just pops into my head, because it's the moon passing over. So, now, another thing that I've put this talk in the other group, right? That a lot of those recumbent stone circles with those recumbent stones were filled in with stones and pebbles anyway. So it was also kind of like they're made out of, they're filled in with stone. It's almost like a little tiny model of the moon, a little movie set, because, the moon is like a solid, it's like a big stone object in the sky anyway. So to fill the recumbent stone circle in with stones, right? It's kind of like making a little model of the moon anyway. Now, what the hell has that got to do with, anything over in Ireland? Well, I was talking to a girl in the group about Drogheda, and it might have been in the Irish megalithic research group, and she said that Drogheda means the bridge over the ford, to bridge the gap across the ford in the river. Well, the ford is where the water runs low. It either runs high, the river, when there's a lot of rain, you get a higher river, or when there's not enough rain, it runs low and you get a ford. So the ford, when there's no water flowing, it reveals the base of the river, which is all stone. It's all stones. When you go to a ford or a river, when it's not flowing, it's all hard stones. Well, these recumbent stone circles were full of stones, right? And they've got the recumbent stone laid down is bridging the gap between two of the stones. So I think that this, the bridge over the ford, Drogheda, right? I think there's something in that to when it's a certain time and certain conditions are right, when the river's not running deep, when the river's running shallow, when it's got a ford, and it reveals the stones and you can cross it, right? Now, that, then, I think of, it's a certain time of year and a certain time when conditions are right for the moon to go across the top of the recumbent stone circle that I've set up, okay? Because it's the course through the sky of the moon, which is set in motion. Now, at the river, at the stream at Drogheda, we've got the river, the course of the river from the highlands, from the moors where the water starts and it flows through and down to the sea. It's been set in motion by nature. It's the course, the divine course of the river, right? Whereas this is the divine course of the moon. Now, So we've got two separate things. You can think of the symbol of Newgrange with the light shining in, at certain times whether the sun's high or low, right? The lowest part of the sun versus the highest point of the sun, right? It's like when you draw out to the farther to the sun, it's remembering you of the high point and the low point, right? That's one site. And then at the recumbent stone circles in Scotland, you've got this from left to right, when the moon goes across the top of the recumbent stones. Now, what's that got to do with talks? Well, the talks have, it's a circle, not unlike the circle that they've put through this cross, right? And the circle only appears on the Celtic crosses primarily, right? So it is like a talk, and because it's about, you got this Holy Spirit, and it's to do with, the forces that flow. Now, I've got another video that I've started to talk about the diagrams on the stones outside Newgrange. Now, the stones outside Newgrange are laid horizontal anyway, like the recumbent stone circles that are in Scotland. But the recumbent stone circles that are in Scotland are bridging the gap between the stones, and the moon goes over it. But we've got these stones laid out at Newgrange, but it's to do with the sun. But when we've still got the high point and the low point of the sun, and then you've got the stones laid down in front of it. And there is some, I've done a whole talk on metal and magnetism, and, you know, we say that, you know, they didn't do metal working until later on, you know, like Iron Age and when they were working with tin, you know, because they call it Stone Age, but they must have, I've done a whole talk, I don't want to talk about that in this video, but I've done a whole talk about, they must have known about magnetic forces and have discovered them, because if you've discovered, you know, rubbing sticks together and making fire, you must have discovered, you know, metals and stuff, but you don't see many people mentioning that or talking about it when they do talks about religion and Christianity, and I've watched a lot of videos about the ancient sites and stone circles, and I don't hear anyone talking about this or mentioning it. Maybe I've been watching the wrong videos, you know. I know it's kind of, to be honest, I think it's kind of self-evident, but, you know, if it was self-evident, then why don't people mention it, you know, or talk about it? So I just wanted to raise the subject, you know, so people can, you know, go out and get other evidence and attach it, and if they've got something to say about it, you know, you're not raising no arguments, you know, it's a legitimate subject that I think, you know, I have thought about it before anyway, but I've not actually thought about the recumbent stone circles in Scotland because, you know, it's kind of a lot of people know that, you know, the layout of the cross mysteriously is kind of a little bit like the chambers, the layout of some of the chambers in some of the cairns anyway, you know, but we don't actually, I've not actually seen anyone mention the recumbent stone circle, but obviously the circle around it is like the moon anyway, you know, it's like the sun or it's like the moon. And also the circle in the middle here on this particular drawing, because they're not all the same drawings, it's almost like, you know, the moon going in front of the sun in a way, because when you get an eclipse, although they've drawn it smaller, not like the same size. So, you know, and the Celtic knots, you know, it kind of, you know, makes me think of these things that are permanently set in motion, you know, like the flow of the river, you know, it's set, you can change the course of the river, but you can't stop the water from flowing because it will always rain down and it will always gather on the ground and it will always find its own route, whichever route it is. You know, man can sort of change the route a little bit, but you can't actually stop the divine motion of, you know, the rain really falling down. And then you've got like the divine motion of the moon and the sun. So, you know, why the talk? Because the talk is the circle, you know, and then you've got you got that bit where, you know, there's a gap so you can get it on, right? Well, it's kind of like the opposite on the recumbent stone circle. You've got the stone circle, but we've all got gaps in it. But on the one place, you've got the join. But I wanted just to kind of highlight that. And I thought it's worth noting. I think it's a valid and legitimate thing to point out, you know, the talk with the recumbent stone circle. Because to be honest, I hadn't even thought about the Newgrange stones that are laid down recumbent in front of the site. You know, I should have done, mainly because, you know, the Scottish recumbent stones don't have loads of elaborate pictures over them, you know, whereas the Newgrange ones do have the drawings over them. And I think the distraction of the drawings, when you look at the pictures of Newgrange, it kind of draws me straight into the drawings, and I kind of just forget that, oh yeah, it's, you know, massive stones laid down sideways. So I usually don't get on to thinking about it in context of the Scottish recumbent circles, because I'm kind of distracted by the pictures that are on the front of the stones, even though, you know, it's kind of obvious that, you know, the Scottish were referred to as the Picts, and that's where they will get the word picture. So, you know, there's a lot of things that people are focused on, you know, and maybe a lot of it is obvious and self-evident, but, you know, I don't see people posting about it and talking about it, so I kind of wanted to, you know, get onto the subject and see if we could find some more associations and connections, you know. I think it's important that And also, one more thing, when you see the rainbow, it's a certain angle, a certain number of degrees that you are at, you know, when the light shines through the rainbow for it to make the rainbow effect. And we've got those little kind of rainbow things on the stones anyway in the front of Newgrange. And when the sun's at the certain angle is when it shines through, you know, and you can see the light in the chamber. Also, you've got these little holes, right, in the stone. Now, where do you find metal ore? You can, if you're in nature and you find deposits of metal, you usually find deposits of metal either in the ground or kind of like, you know, in other bits of stone, and you've got to kind of chip them out to get the metal out. So it's almost like, you know, and then, you know, I don't think it takes much to explore and learn about the existence of magnetism, because when you hit a piece of metal 50 times, it magnetizes it. So, you know, they might not have invented kilns to melt metal down and make proper objects like axes and all that, but I'm pretty certain without a doubt that they found, you know, and knew about the magnetism, or at least the people who built the sites did and knew it existed, which is why they've got, you know, the little kind of magnet things on there, because you've always got one end positive and negative, and, you know, you're always going to find a little bit of metal that's smaller than a big bit of metal, and it works better when it's elongated, you know. You don't have that magnetic properties when it's perfectly round as much as when you've got a rectangular shape, and then you start getting into why is the 3 dots in a row and why are the recumbent stones long. You start getting into Howard Crowhurst, and you start to get into these shapes, these, you know, 357 or 347 rectangles, and you start getting into mathematical divine measurements that are in your mind, you know, mental measurements that you know, that you've got these, you know, perfect rectangles, and using these perfect rectangles you can work out all these alignments and mathematical calculations. It's all about, you know, the set. These mathematical principles are kind of set, you know, triangles and all this, they're set. So when you get them in the perfect shape, you can work out these perfect measurements, you know. It's almost like the divine measurements, you know, the divine shapes. It's set in nature, you know, and we can understand them. And it's almost like, you know, the set motion. It's about the divine courses, you know, the divine courses, the courses of which the measurements are laid out in nature, like, you know, geometrical measurements, like, you know, you've got the the hexagonal shapes, Giant's Causeway, and then, you know, the fact that the moon and the sun go into a circular shape, you know, because of gravity and all that, all these effects, you know. So he's kind of stating the obvious, and it is kind of, in a way, you know, you think, you know, do I even have to do the talk? But, you know, you still get people typing all the time on the groups, you know, no one knows what the stones mean, or we don't know what it means, and then, you know, you get people saying, oh, well, there's this theory, and there's that theory, and there's the other theory. I ain't ever heard anyone make a video and say this, you know, even Howard Crowhurst going on about, you know, the measurements and the alignments and the stones, and then he gets onto the, you know, the other aspects of it, and he says, well, I don't know, you know. It's not like he's, you know, just throwing this in as a theory. He says that he doesn't know, but to me, I think that, and the fact that you can have this cross with the circle and it fits the symbology of, you know, this, the sun, the high points, the low points shining into Newgrange, and the recumbent circle with the moon going over it laid down, and you've got these circles in it, and it fits it, and then you've got the village stocks, which just happens to be an object for a different use, but yet the design of it, the selected design with the one stone either side, with the laid down bit of wood with the circles in it, which is, when you look at the moon with the circle with the recumbent stone, it's all to kind of, to me, it's like, you know, it's not, they're not getting a book and writing you out and just telling you in detail. They're getting the basic symbology of it and getting it recorded and noted down so we don't forget it in a basic symbolic form, you know. And there are other videos that I've done with talks that are still up on the Irish Megalithic Research site and on this group in response to Newgrange stones and that, but I didn't want to have to put those videos again in this post because I thought everyone had already seen them, you know. So that's basically the essence of it, you know. There's no arguments, you know. I can, you know, I kind of feel that I'm getting discriminated against, you know, in my posts because, you know, some people just put a picture or a photo, an art photo, and they don't put a description, and it's fine. But yeah, I put a photo and I don't put a description, and it seems to get pulled. But I don't know why that is. It's not. I don't think it's fair, to be honest. And particularly when people are putting Avebury videos of Avebury Festival with no problem, and I put a video of the Stonehenge Festival, and then it gets pulled down, and I didn't do anything wrong. It kind of is discrimination in a way, and I kind of get a bit annoyed with it, you know.